"We're finally shutting down your embarrassing business," her husband announced in court. His mother nodded approvingly. She stood silently. The judge looked up. "Wait, this is the company that just secured the $890 million defense contract. I need to see. Hi, my beautiful family. May the heavenly God bless every woman with a heart that radiates love, strength that can move mountains, and wisdom that lights the path for generations. May your days be filled with joy, your nights with peace, and your families wrapped in endless protection. You are the pillars of life, the silent strength that carries homes, the purest reflection of grace and resilience. May every challenge transform into opportunity, every tear turn into hope, and may your sacrifices be honored beyond measure. May your voices be heard, your dreams fulfilled, and your spirit celebrated. You deserve the highest respect, love, and blessings for all that you give to the world. If your heart is true, like the video. If your love is real, write, "I am with Mr. Peter." The smell of welding metal still hung in the air when Joe Perry walked through the door of Brianna Scurry's manufacturing workshop. She didn't look up from the blueprint spread across her desk. The afternoon sun cut through the high windows, illuminating 6 employees working on various stations across the warehouse floor. The sound of machinery hummed beneath everything, a rhythm Brianna had learned to find peaceful, even meditative. "Brianna," Joe's voice carried that tone she'd learned to recognize over the years. Triumph mixed with cruelty. She lifted her head. He wasn't alone. His attorney stood beside him, a thin man with a briefcase that looked expensive. Behind them both, Ruby Perry smiled, that particular smile that had always made Brianna's stomach turn. Joe's mother had perfected the art of looking both sympathetic and victorious simultaneously. "We need to make this official," Joe said, walking forward. He placed a manila envelope on top of her blueprints, covering the design she'd been reviewing. "Divorce papers. I'm done." The workshop went silent. Sarah, her lead engineer, stopped mid-weld. The others froze at their stations, all eyes turning toward the office area. Brianna could feel their attention, their shock, their pity. She reached for the envelope with steady hands. "You get nothing," Joe continued, his voice rising now, performing for an audience. "This dump is worthless. You're broke. The bank statements prove it. And I'm keeping the house. My money paid for it. Every mortgage payment came from my accounts while you played in this garage." Ruby stepped forward, her designer handbag clutched against her chest like armor. "Finally, my son is free of this embarrassment. Do you know what it's like, Brianna, watching my boy waste his potential supporting your little hobby? All those years, all that money, flushed away on machinery and metal scraps." The attorney opened his briefcase, pulled out a pen. "Mrs. Scurry, if you'll sign here, here, and here. Mr. Perry is requesting the marital home, 50% of any business assets, and spousal support to compensate for the years he invested in supporting your venture." Brianna took the pen. She didn't read the documents. She'd already reviewed identical papers weeks ago when Joe's attorney had sent the courtesy copy. She'd known this moment was coming. She'd felt it building like pressure before a storm. She signed each line with careful precision. Her signature hadn't changed since she was 22. Brianna Scurry. Clean, confident, clear. "That's it?" Joe's voice held disappointment, as if he'd been expecting tears, begging, drama. "Nothing to say?" Brianna looked up at him. Really looked. The man she'd married at 25 stood before her now, but he'd become someone she didn't recognize. His hairline had receded slightly. He'd gained weight around his middle, but it was his eyes that had changed most. They held a meanness that hadn't been there in the beginning, or maybe it had always been there, and she'd been too young to see it. "No," she said simply. "Nothing to say." Ruby laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Well, I suppose that's appropriate. You were never much for words, were you, dear? Always so cold, so focused on your work. That's why my Joseph needed a real woman who could appreciate him." Sarah moved then, stepping forward from her welding station. "Mrs. Scurry, do you need—" Brianna raised one hand, stopping her. "Get everyone back to work. We have a Pentagon prototype due soon. And Sarah?" Not a word to anyone about what we're really building here." Joe laughed. "Pentagon? Jesus, you're still living in that fantasy world. This place is worth maybe 20,000 if you're lucky. Scrap value." "We're done here," the attorney said, gathering the signed documents. "Miss Scurry, you'll receive formal notice about the court date. We'll be pursuing full asset disclosure, so please have all business records prepared." They left the way they came, Joe's hand on his mother's elbow, the attorney walking ahead, opening doors like they were royalty departing a conquered territory. The workshop remained silent for a long moment after the door closed. Then Sarah spoke, her voice careful. "Boss, are we going to be okay?" Brianna stood, walked to the large filing cabinet in the corner of her office. The bottom drawer required a key that she wore on a chain around her neck, hidden beneath her work shirt. She unlocked it, pulled the drawer open. Inside sat 3 thick folders. The tabs read, Evidence, Timeline, Divorce Strategy. She'd been building these files for years, every bank statement showing Joe's withdrawals, every hotel receipt, every piece of jewelry charged to their joint credit card that she'd never received, every text message screenshot, every email, every moment of documented betrayal, documented theft, documented cruelty, and beneath those folders, a single manila envelope. The return address read, Pentagon Defense Innovation Unit. "Sarah," Brianna said, her voice steady as steel, "we're going to be more than okay. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Sarah looked at the filing cabinet, at her boss's face, at the blueprint on the desk that she knew represented technology years ahead of anything else in their industry. "I trust you," Sarah said. Brianna smiled, a real smile, the first in hours. "Good, because in a few months everything changes. But until then, not a word. To anyone." She locked the drawer, pocketed the key, returned to her desk where Joe's divorce papers had left a crease across her blueprint. She smoothed the paper flat, studying the design beneath, the armor plating system that would change everything. The prototype that the Pentagon had already selected, already tested, already approved. Joe thought she was broke. He thought she was broken. He thought this workshop was worthless scrap and failed dreams. He had no idea what was coming. Outside, the afternoon sun continued its slow descent. Inside, Brianna Scurry went back to work, her hands steady, her mind clear, her revenge already in motion, calculated, precise, and absolutely devastating. She'd been waiting 3 years for him to make the first move. Now, the countdown had begun. Chapter 2. The Birthday Annihilation. 3 years earlier, Brianna Scurry turned 35 in a garage that smelled like motor oil and possibility. The prototype sat on her workbench, revolutionary armor plating that could withstand impacts conventional systems couldn't handle. She'd spent 11 months designing it, another 8 building the testing models, working hours that stretched from dawn until her eyes burned and her hands cramped. The house was dark when she finally came home that night. Her actual birthday. The calendar had flipped to March 15th, and she'd been so consumed by work that she'd almost forgotten. Almost. But she'd hoped Joe might remember. Might do something simple. Order dinner, maybe. Get a cake. Acknowledge that she'd been born, that she mattered. The front door opened to silence. Then voices, Joe's laugh, low and intimate, and another voice. Female. Familiar. Brianna found them in the dining room. Joe sat at the head of their table, a bottle of wine open between him and Amber Chen, his business partner, from the real estate firm where he worked. "Babe," Joe's voice carried surprise but not guilt. "You're home early." "It's 9:30, Brianna said. The clock on the wall confirmed it. "On my birthday." Joe's face went blank for a moment, then flooded with obviously fake concern. Shit, I forgot. We were celebrating. Amber closed the Riverside development deal. It's huge, babe. Huge commission for both of us." Amber smiled, standing to give Brianna an air kiss that landed nowhere near her face. The woman wore a dress that cost more than Brianna's monthly equipment budget, and something else, a scent that made Brianna's stomach drop. Is that Chanel number 5? Brianna asked. Amber touched her neck, pleased. You have a good nose. It's my favorite. Joe had bought Brianna that exact perfume for Christmas. The bottle still sat unopened on her dresser because she never wore perfume to the workshop. The chemicals interfered with welding. Happy birthday, by the way, Amber added like an afterthought. The phone rang. Joe glanced at the screen, groaned. It's Mom. I should take this. He left the room, and Brianna stood alone with Amber and the remains of a meal she hadn't been invited to share. You know, Amber said, pouring herself more wine, Joe talks about you sometimes, about how you're never home, how hard it must be, being married to someone who's always in a garage instead of building a real life. Brianna's hands clenched at her sides. I'm building a company. Sure, Amber said, her tone suggesting she didn't believe it. That's sweet. From the other room, Joe's voice rose in frustration. Mom, I know. We're working on it. Brianna's just... Yes, I understand. I'll talk to her again. He returned, phone in hand, expression dark. My mother wants to know when you're going to stop playing in that garage and give her grandchildren. I told her we'd discuss it. Did you? Brianna's voice came out flat, drained of emotion. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. She was so tired, bone-tired, soul-tired. I'm going to bed. Already? We just opened a second bottle. She left them there, her husband and his business partner, celebrating in her home on her birthday, wearing her perfume. In the bedroom, she sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at nothing. Then she remembered the credit card statement that had arrived yesterday. She'd glanced at it, meant to look closer, hadn't had time. Now she pulled it from the pile of mail on her dresser. Victoria's Secret, multiple charges. She'd never shopped there. Hotel suites in the city, the Four Seasons, the Plaza, dates when Joe had claimed he was at conferences, at client meetings, working late, and jewelry purchases, Tiffany's, 3 separate transactions. She'd received nothing for Christmas except the perfume that Amber now wore. The bedroom door opened. Joe, annoyed. Are you seriously mad about dinner? It was a business thing, Brianna. You understand business. Do I? She held up the statement. Explain these. His face changed. Calculation replaced irritation. Those are legitimate business expenses, client entertainment. You don't understand how real estate works. Victoria's Secret is client entertainment? Gift for a client's wife. Look, I don't have time for this paranoid... Get out. What? Get out of this room. Go back to your business partner. Go sleep in the guest room. Go wherever you want. But get away from me. He stared at her like she'd lost her mind. You're being dramatic. This is why we have problems, Brianna. You're so cold, so suspicious. What kind of wife accuses her husband of... What am I accusing you of, Joe? Say it. He didn't. Instead, he grabbed his pillow, his phone charger. Fine. You want to be alone? Be alone. But don't forget, this house, my income pays for it. That garage, my patience allows it. You choose machines over being a wife, over being a mother, over being a real partner. So don't act surprised when I need to find my support elsewhere. He slammed the door. Downstairs she heard laughter, Amber's voice musical and light. Is everything okay? She's just in one of her moods, Joe said. More wine? Brianna didn't cry. She sat in the dark, the credit card statement crumpled in her fist, and something inside her made a decision. She opened her laptop, searched for divorce attorneys, made a list. Then she opened a new browser window and began documenting everything, screenshots of the credit card statement, photos of the perfume bottle, notes with dates and times and details. At 2 in the morning, she went down to the garage, not to work on the prototype, to think. Her father had taught her how to weld when she was 16. He'd believed in her when no one else did, invested his retirement savings in her first equipment, told her she could build anything if she was patient enough and smart enough. He'd also taught her something else. Baby girl, never let anyone see you break. You save your tears for private. You show the world your steel. Brianna pulled out her phone, called her father's attorney. a man who'd handled his estate planning and had told her years ago, "If you ever need legal help, I'm here." It was too late to call. She sent an email instead. "I need a consultation, divorce preparation, confidential, and I need to open a business account separate from my husband. Monday." Then she went back to her prototype. She welded until dawn, her hands steady despite everything, because steel didn't care about broken hearts. Steel just needed heat and pressure and time. When the sun rose, she'd made her decision. Not revenge, not yet. Preparation, documentation, strategy. Joe thought she was cold. She'd show him cold. She'd show him what ice really looked like when it had been sharpened for years and finally came down like a blade. In the garage, sparks flew from her welding torch, and somewhere in the darkness before dawn, the woman Joe Perry had betrayed became someone new, someone dangerous, someone who would remember this birthday for the rest of her life, not as the day her heart broke, but as the day she started building his destruction. Chapter 3. The Investor Heist. 8 months after that birthday, Brianna secured the meeting that could change everything. Thomas Wright wasn't just any investor. He was the investor. Former Pentagon procurement officer turned private defense contractor. The man who'd launched 5 successful military technology companies and had connections that reached from Washington to Brussels. Getting 10 minutes of his time had taken Brianna 6 months of networking, cold emails, leveraging every connection her father had left her. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 9 in the morning at Wright's downtown office. She'd practiced her pitch until she could deliver it in her sleep. The prototype worked. She'd tested it dozens of times, documented every result, refined every weakness. The armor plating system could change how military vehicles were protected. It was lighter, stronger, cheaper to manufacture than anything currently in use. On Wednesday night, she stayed late at the garage, running through her presentation one final time. The prototype sat on the demonstration table, polished and ready. Her laptop held the slideshow she'd built, showing impact tests, material analysis, cost projections. Joe came home around 10. She heard him in the house, moving around, opening the refrigerator. Then his footsteps on the stairs leading down to the garage. "Still working?" He leaned against the doorframe, beer in hand. They'd been civil since her birthday, maintaining a cold peace that neither acknowledged. He slept in the guest room now. She didn't ask why. "Big meeting tomorrow," she said, not looking up from her notes. "Investor pitch." "Yeah?" He wandered closer, curious despite himself. "What kind of investor?" "Defense sector. Thomas Wright." Joe whistled. "That's a big name. How'd you score that meeting?" "Persistence." She closed her laptop, gathered her materials. "I should get some sleep." "Can I see the pitch? Maybe I can offer feedback. I do this stuff for a living, you know. Real estate presentations, investor meetings. It's basically the same thing." Something in his voice made her hesitate. But she was tired, and part of her, the part that still remembered loving him, wanted to believe he might actually help. "Sure," she said, opening the laptop again. "It's pretty technical, but the basics are simple. Revolutionary armor plating, lower cost, higher performance." She walked him through the slides, showed him the prototype, explained the testing results, the market opportunity, the production timeline. Joe asked questions that sounded intelligent, took photos of the prototype with his phone. "To show my buddies, they'll think this is cool," laughed when she explained the tensile strength calculations. "This is actually impressive," he admitted. "Wright would be stupid not to invest." "You got your blueprints locked up?" "Always," she said. "In the filing cabinet. I'm paranoid about intellectual property theft." "Smart," he said. "Well, good luck tomorrow, I mean it." He kissed her forehead, the first physical contact in months, and went back upstairs. Brianna locked up the garage, triple-checked that her blueprint cabinet was secure, and went to bed. Thursday morning arrived cold and clear. She dressed in the one suit she owned, packed her laptop and materials, and went down to the garage to collect the prototype. The filing cabinet was still locked, but when she opened it, her stomach dropped. The blueprints were gone. The folder that held her detailed technical schematics, her material specifications, her manufacturing process, empty. She tore through the cabinet, knowing even as she did it that they weren't there. Someone had taken them. Someone who had access to her garage, to her workspace, to her trust. The meeting was in 30 minutes. She had no time to panic, no time to think. She grabbed the prototype, grabbed her laptop, and drove downtown with her hands shaking on the wheel. Wright's office was all glass and steel, overlooking the river. His assistant led her to a conference room where Wright sat with 2 associates, all 3 reviewing documents. "Ms. Scurry," Wright said, standing to shake her hand. His grip was firm, professional. "I appreciate you coming in." "Thank you for the opportunity," she said, setting up her laptop with fingers that barely functioned. "Before we begin," Wright said slowly, "I need to ask you something. Someone presented a design very similar to yours yesterday. Almost identical, actually. Joe Perry. He says he's the lead developer and you're the... what did he call it? The welder." The room tilted. Brianna gripped the edge of the table, her fingernails biting into expensive wood. "He what?" "Brought in blueprints, a pitch deck, a prototype. Said his wife does the hands-on assembly, but he's the engineering mind behind the project. He's asking for a significantly larger investment than what you proposed in your preliminary email." Wright's associates watched her carefully, looking for her reaction. This was a test, she realized. They were seeing how she'd handle it. "Mr. Wright," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "Joe Perry is my husband. He has 0 engineering background. What he showed you is stolen intellectual property, my intellectual property. Can you prove that? I have provisional patents filed, time-stamped design sketches, witness signatures from my employees who've watched me develop this system, and I have test results that only I could have conducted because only I have access to the equipment and materials." Wright leaned back in his chair. "Interesting. Your husband was very convincing, very confident. Said you might try to claim credit after he rejected your attempts to join his project." Brianna felt her world crumbling. Everything she'd built, everything she'd worked for, Joe had reached out and taken it, twisted it, tried to steal not just her designs but her identity as the creator. "I understand this is complicated," she said carefully. "I don't want to waste your time with marital disputes. But I'm asking you to look at the evidence before making any decisions. Check the patent office, call my references, and if you still have doubts, I'll submit to any technical evaluation you want. Test my knowledge. I'll prove I designed this." Wright studied her for a long moment. "Miss Scurry, I've been in this business 30 years. I've seen a lot of people try to steal other people's work. I've also seen a lot of legitimate partnerships go sour when credit gets disputed. Here's my problem. You're asking me to invest in technology where the ownership is unclear. That's a legal nightmare I don't need." "I understand," she said. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Thank you for your time." She packed her laptop, disconnected the prototype, walked to the elevator with her spine straight and her eyes dry because she would not cry in Thomas Wright's office, would not give him or anyone else the satisfaction of seeing her broken. In the parking garage, sitting in her car, she finally allowed herself to feel it. The betrayal, the rage, the absolute comprehensive destruction of her trust, her marriage, her future. Joe had taken her blueprints, had stolen her work, had tried to convince one of the most important investors in the industry that she was nothing but a welder, a helper, a pair of hands attached to his brilliant mind. She pulled out her phone, called her patent attorney, the one she'd hired months ago, the one who'd been helping her file protections. "David, it's Brianna Scurry. My husband just tried to steal my design and present it to an investor as his own work. I need to know, how do we destroy him?" The attorney's voice was calm, professional. "How much documentation do you have?" "Everything. Time-stamped sketches, patent filings, witness statements, email trails showing I discussed this project before I ever mentioned it to him." "Then here's what we do. We don't rush. We let him commit the fraud publicly. We let him think he succeeded. We document every lie, every presentation, every claim he makes. And then, when he's completely exposed, we annihilate him legally. Patent infringement, fraud, theft of intellectual property. We make him an example that will follow him for the rest of his career. How long will that take? Months, maybe. But Brianna, it'll be worth it. Trust the process, document everything, and whatever you do, don't let him know you're building the case. She drove home. Joe's car was in the driveway. He'd taken the day off, probably to celebrate his new investor partnership. He was in the kitchen when she walked in, champagne bottle open, grinning like a man who'd won the lottery. "Babe, how'd your meeting go?" She looked at him, really looked. Saw the man who'd stolen from her, betrayed her, tried to erase her from her own creation. And she smiled. A smile that didn't reach her eyes, didn't warm her face, didn't mean anything except that she was done playing the victim. "It went fine," she said. "I think Wright is interested. We'll see." "That's great," Joe said, oblivious. "I had a good day too. Things are really looking up for us, you know?" "Sure," Brianna said. "Things are looking up." She went to the garage, locked the door, and began the next phase of her war. Thomas Wright's assistant called her private cell phone an hour later. "Miss Scurry, Mr. Wright asked me to tell you something off the record. He doesn't trust your husband, not at all. If you can provide definitive proof of original development, he wants to see you again. Alone. And he suggested you might want to consider whether your husband should have access to your future work." Brianna closed her eyes, allowed herself one moment of vindication. Then she got back to work. Chapter 4. The Hospital Abandonment. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. Brianna's phone vibrated on the nightstand, pulling her from shallow sleep. She grabbed it before the second ring, already knowing, the way you know bad news before you hear it, that everything was about to change. "Miss Scurry, this is Valley Memorial Hospital. Your father had a massive stroke. He's in the ICU. You should come now." The drive was 20 minutes that felt like hours. She called Joe from the car, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. Joe, wake up. My dad, he had a stroke. I'm going to the hospital. Please come." His voice was thick with sleep. What time is it?" 2:30. "Joe, I need you. Please." There was noise in the background. Music, voices. "Babe, I'm in Miami. The conference, remember? I told you about this trip." She hadn't remembered. He'd mentioned something about a real estate conference, but she'd been so focused on rebuilding her prototype, on documenting Joe's theft, on preparing for the patent fraud case her attorney was building. "You're in Miami?" Her voice was flat, dead. "Yeah, flew out yesterday. Look, I'll catch a flight tomorrow morning, okay? First thing, your dad's tough, he'll be fine. Just keep me posted." In the background, a woman's voice, giggling. "Joe, come back, the song is starting." "Who's that?" Brianna asked. "Just some people from the conference. We're at a networking event." "Babe, I gotta go. Call me with updates, okay? Love you." He hung up before she could respond. At the hospital, her father lay in the ICU, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed and measured the distance between life and death. The neurologist explained in careful, gentle terms: massive hemorrhagic stroke, significant brain damage, unlikely to regain consciousness. "How long?" Brianna asked. "Days, maybe. A week at most. I'm sorry." She sat beside his bed and held his hand, the hand that had taught her to weld, to trust her own skill, to believe she could build anything if she refused to quit. "Daddy," she whispered, "I'm here. I'm right here." He didn't respond. The machines breathed for him, kept his heart beating, maintained the illusion of life in a body that had already begun its final journey. She called Joe every few hours, left messages, sent texts. "Dad's not waking up. Please come." "The doctors say days. I need you here." "Joe, please." He didn't answer, didn't call back, didn't come. For 5 days, Brianna lived in that hospital room. The nurses brought her coffee, offered gentle words, left her alone with her father and her grief. She barely ate, couldn't sleep. just sat and held his hand and talked to him about the company, the prototype, the future he wouldn't see. On the 5th day, his breathing changed. The doctor came, checked the monitors, looked at her with sympathy. "It's time," he said. "Would you like us to call anyone?" "No," she said. "It's just me." Her father died at 3:15 in the afternoon while Brianna held his hand and told him she loved him, that she'd make him proud, that she'd build something extraordinary in his name. The funeral was scheduled for the following Saturday. Joe finally called back on Thursday. "Babe, I'm so sorry. This conference has been insane, but I'll definitely be there for the funeral. What time?" 2 o'clock, Valley Memorial Chapel. "Got it. See you then. Love you." Saturday arrived grey and cold. Brianna stood at the front of the chapel in a black dress she'd bought the day before, greeting mourners. Her father's friends from the VFW, neighbours, some of his old co-workers from the factory where he'd spent 30 years. The service was scheduled to start at 2. At 2:15, Joe still hadn't arrived. At 2:30, the funeral director asked gently if they should begin. "Yes," Brianna said. "Start." Joe walked in at 3:45, nearly 2 hours late. He wasn't alone. Amber wore a black dress that cost more than Brianna's father's casket. She clung to Joe's arm, whispered something that made him smile, then arranged her face into appropriate solemnity when she noticed people staring. Ruby arrived beside them, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief despite never having liked Brianna's father. They sat in the back row. Joe didn't come to the front, didn't approach Brianna, just sat there, Amber beside him, Ruby weeping dramatically for a man she'd once called that factory worker who thinks his daughter is an engineer. The reception was held at the chapel's community room. Brianna stood near the photo display, accepting condolences, holding herself together through sheer will. Joe approached with Amber still attached to his arm. "Sorry we're late. Flight delays, you know how it is. Your dad would understand." "You were in Miami 5 days ago," Brianna said quietly. "The funeral was today. What flight?" Joe's expression flickered, caught. "We had to route through Charlotte. Nightmare connections." Ruby appeared beside them, her handkerchief pressed to her dry eyes. "Such a tragedy. Brian couldn't get away from work sooner. He tried so hard, Brianna. You must know that. He's such a dedicated man, always putting his career first. Just like someone else we know." The accusation was clear. "You're cold. You're career-focused. You're the reason your marriage is failing." Amber leaned close, her voice soft enough that only Brianna could hear. "Joe says you're cold. That's why he needs a real woman who appreciates him, someone warm, someone present." Brianna looked at the three of them, her husband, his mother, his mistress, standing in front of her father's photograph, pretending grief, radiating judgment. She excused herself, walked to the bathroom, locked the door, stared at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked destroyed, hollowed out, broken. She'd lost 15 pounds. Her suit hung loose. Her eyes were red-rimmed and empty. "Get it together," she whispered to herself. "Get it together. He doesn't get to see you break." She washed her face, reapplied lipstick with shaking hands, straightened her spine. When she returned to the reception, she walked to the small podium where the minister had spoken earlier. "Excuse me," she said. "I'd like to say a few words about my father." The room quieted. Joe looked up from his conversation with Amber. Ruby stopped mid-sob. "My father taught me many things," Brianna said, her voice steady and clear. "He taught me how to weld, how to read blueprints, how to trust my own skill even when others doubted me. But the most important thing he taught me was this: real power is built in silence while weak people talk. Strength isn't about making noise. It's about doing the work, building the foundation, surviving the storms that would break lesser people." She looked directly at Joe. "He taught me that some people will try to steal what you've built, that some people will abandon you when you need them most, that some people will mistake your patience for weakness, your silence for defeat. And he taught me to let them. Let them think they've won. Let them celebrate. Let them get comfortable. Ruby shifted uncomfortably. Amber looked confused. Joe's face had gone pale. Because real power, Brianna continued, doesn't need to announce itself. It just is. And eventually, inevitably, it reveals itself in ways that can't be denied, can't be stolen, can't be diminished by people who were never strong enough to build anything of their own. She raised her glass of water. To my father, who taught me to be steel. The room applauded quietly. Brianna stepped down, accepted more condolences, maintained her composure until the last mourner left. Joe and Amber and Ruby had disappeared somewhere in the middle of her speech. That night, alone in the house that no longer felt like home, Brianna received the email from her father's attorney. The estate was settled. After debts and expenses, she was inheriting money. Not a fortune, but enough. She stared at the number, made a decision. Every penny went into her company. New equipment, 3 new engineers, upgraded materials, a move to a larger facility that Joe would never visit, never see, never know existed. And she filed the paperwork under her maiden name only. Scurry Advanced Systems. No Joe, no marital connection, just her name, her work, her future. In the weeks after her father's death, Thomas Wright reached out. Miss Scurry, I've done my research. I know what your husband tried to do. I know about the theft. The Pentagon's Defense Innovation Unit is looking for armor solutions. I'm recommending you. Don't tell anyone, not even your husband. Especially not your husband. Brianna sat alone in her new facility and allowed herself to smile. Her father had taught her patience. Now she'd teach Joe Perry about consequences. Chapter 5. The Secret Empire Rises. 18 months passed like water over stone. Slow, persistent, reshaping everything. To anyone watching, Brianna Scurry's life looked like a study in quiet failure. She drove the same old Honda, wore the same work clothes, came home late every night to a house where she and Joe maintained separate lives, connected only by a shared address and a marriage certificate neither had bothered to dissolve. At home, she was invisible, insignificant. The wife who'd failed to give up her garage hobby, who'd failed to make her little business profitable, who'd failed to become the woman Ruby Perry demanded and Joe Perry deserved. But across town, in the facility she'd rented using only her maiden name, a different story was unfolding. Scurry Advanced Systems had 15 employees now. The team included Sarah as lead engineer, 3 additional mechanical specialists, 2 materials scientists, a project manager, an accountant, and a small administrative staff. The facility itself was 6,000 square feet of pristine workspace, climate-controlled, equipped with machinery that made her original garage setup look like a child's toy collection. Brianna had learned to live in 2 worlds simultaneously. At home, she was small. At work, she was building an empire. The Pentagon contract started small, a materials analysis project worth $30,000, then a component testing contract for $50,000, then a full system evaluation for $200,000. Each project came through Thomas Wright's recommendation, through the networks he'd helped her build, through her own growing reputation in defense circles that Joe Perry knew nothing about. She was careful, obsessively careful. All business mail went to a P.O. box. All payments went to business accounts Joe had never seen. She kept 2 separate phones, her personal cell that Joe occasionally checked, and her business phone that stayed locked in her desk drawer at the facility. She paid their mortgage from her personal account, using the small consulting fees she claimed to earn. She bought groceries with cash. She maintained the fiction of barely scraping by, of her hobby consuming money rather than generating it. Joe never questioned it. Why would he? He'd stopped seeing her as a person years ago. She was just the wife who wasn't enough, who failed at the things that mattered to Ruby Perry, who refused to quit her garage obsession and become someone respectable. He was too busy with his own life to notice hers. The investor partnership he'd stolen from Brianna had collapsed spectacularly. Thomas Wright had quietly contacted the firm Joe approached, informing them of potential intellectual property concerns. The firm's attorneys reviewed the provisional patents Brianna had filed, compared them to Joe's pitch materials, and immediately withdrew. Then they sued. Patent infringement, fraud, attempted theft of intellectual property. Joe was dropped by his real estate firm. The lawsuit made local business news. His reputation in the industry was destroyed. He started drinking, not just socially but seriously. Bottles hidden in the garage in his car, in the guest room where he now lived full-time. Ruby blamed Brianna, of course. Called weekly to scream about how Brianna had sabotaged her baby, how Brianna's jealousy had destroyed Joe's legitimate business opportunity. Brianna listened to the voicemails Ruby left, deleted them without responding, and went back to work. One evening, Joe came home drunk. Really drunk. Stumbling, slurring, barely coherent. Brianna was at the kitchen table, reviewing what looked like bills, but was actually a preliminary contract proposal from the Pentagon's Defense Innovation Unit. She'd learned to keep decoy paperwork around, fake past-due notices, rejection letters from small investors, anything that reinforced the story of her failing business. Still pretending? Joe's words ran together. Still playing engineer? She looked up. He was leaning against the doorframe, holding a piece of mail. Her business mail. The one piece she'd forgotten to intercept, addressed to Brianna Scurry, CEO, Scurry Advanced Systems. Her heart stopped. "What's this?" He waved the envelope. "CEO. You're calling yourself CEO of your garage project." She kept her voice calm. "It's just paperwork. Legal requirement for the LLC. You have an LLC." He laughed. Ugly, bitter. "That's fucking hilarious. You know what's even more hilarious? I'm filing for divorce. Finally. Should have done it years ago." He threw the envelope at her. It fluttered to the table, landing on her fake bills. "You'll be homeless," he continued. "That garage? I'm getting half in the settlement. This house? Mine. I paid for it while you wasted time on your little hobby. My lawyer says I'm entitled to spousal support too, for all the years I supported your failure." Brianna looked at him. The man she'd married at 25. The man who'd seemed kind once before she understood that kindness and cruelty could live in the same person, that love could rot into something unrecognizable. "File," she said simply. "I'll make it easy for you." "What?" "File for divorce. I won't fight it. I'll sign whatever you want." Joe stared at her, confusion breaking through his drunken anger. He'd expected tears, begging, pleading. She was giving him nothing. "You're serious?" "Completely serious. Get a good attorney. File the papers. I'll cooperate fully." He left the kitchen, muttering to himself. Brianna heard him stumble up the stairs, heard the guest room door slam. She picked up the envelope he'd thrown. The return address was from her accountant, marked confidential, but not obviously business-related. Inside was a simple notice about quarterly tax estimates. She'd gotten lucky. If he'd opened it, if he'd seen the numbers, everything would have collapsed. She made a mental note. No more mail to the house. Everything to the P.O. box. No exceptions. That night, she called her divorce attorney. Not the patent attorney. A different one. A specialist in marital dissolution who Thomas Wright had recommended specifically for this moment. "He's going to file," she told him. "Soon." "Good," the attorney said. Let him demand everything. Let him be as aggressive as possible." "Why?" "Because the more he demands, the more he claims he's entitled to, the more humiliated he'll be when the truth comes out. You're not just getting divorced, Brianna. You're detonating a bomb that will destroy him completely. But we need him to build the bomb himself." She understood. Joe would file for divorce, demanding her worthless business, the house, spousal support. He'd present her as a failure, himself as the long-suffering spouse who'd supported her delusions. And then, at exactly the right moment, she'd reveal what she'd really been building while he drank himself into unemployment and blamed her for his self-inflicted destruction. 4 months before their court date, the Pentagon's Defense Innovation Unit finished their evaluation. 12 competitors, dozens of prototypes. hundreds of hours of testing. Brianna's armor system outperformed everything. General Diana Foster called personally, "Ms. Scurry, you're our selection. 890 million over 5 years. Contract signing in 4 months. Public announcement timing is your choice." Brianna sat in her private office, staring at the walls she'd built with her father's inheritance and her own relentless work, and asked, "Can we delay the public announcement until after my divorce finalizes?" General Foster's voice held understanding, and something that might have been respect. "Smart. We'll sign privately. Announce when you're ready. And Mrs. Scurry, congratulations. You just changed the future of military vehicle protection." Chapter 6. The Pentagon Selection. The private signing ceremony took place on a Tuesday morning in a nondescript Pentagon conference room that felt both historic and deliberately unremarkable. General Diana Foster was a black woman in her 50s, with silver-threaded hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. She'd risen through the ranks of Army engineering, served 3 combat deployments, and now headed the Defense Innovation Unit, the Pentagon's initiative to find cutting-edge technology from non-traditional sources. "Ms. Scurry," she offered her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "I've read every report on your armor system. I've watched the test footage. I've spoken with your engineers. This is exceptional work." Brianna shook her hand, trying to process that this was real, that this was happening. "Thank you, General." The contract signing took 30 minutes. Signatures, initials, witnesses. The document was thick as a phone book, dense with legal language and specifications and milestone schedules. 890 million over 5 years. Initial payment of 70 million upon signing. Production facilities, quality control requirements, delivery schedules. When it was done, General Foster sat back in her chair. "The public announcement is typically immediate. We put out a press release. You get media attention. Your competitors cry foul. Everyone moves on. But you requested a delay." "Until my divorce finalizes," Brianna confirmed. "The court date is in 4 months. Your husband doesn't know about this contract." It wasn't a question. "He doesn't know about most of my work," Brianna said carefully. "We've been separated in practice, if not legally. He has no involvement in my company." Foster's expression suggested she understood far more than Brianna had said. "Miss Scurry, I've been in the military for 30 years. I've seen a lot of brilliant people, men and women, undermined by partners who couldn't handle their success. I've also seen people who hid their light to keep peace at home. Neither situation ends well." "I'm not hiding anymore," Brianna said. "I just want to control the timing." "Then here's what we'll do. Contract is signed, sealed, classified. Money transfers to your business accounts this week. You begin production preparation immediately. Public announcement goes when you say. We'll coordinate through my office directly. And Mrs. Scurry?" Foster leaned forward. "When this does go public, it's going to be big. First black woman to win a contract of this size with the Pentagon. Media will swarm. Your life will change overnight. Make sure you're ready." Brianna thought about Joe drinking in the guest room, about Ruby's weekly screaming voicemails, about Amber posting my new family photos online. She was pregnant now, showing off her growing belly like a trophy. "I'm ready," Brianna said. She drove back to her facility where Sarah and the core team were waiting. They knew about the Pentagon evaluation. They'd helped prepare the prototypes, run the tests, refine the designs, but they didn't know the results yet. "We got it," Brianna said simply. The room erupted, cheering, hugging, tears. Sarah grabbed Brianna's shoulders, shaking her. "How much? Tell me how much." "Enough to build 2 more facilities, enough to hire 100 employees, enough to change everything." She didn't say the number, not yet. That would come later, at the right time. That evening she went home to the house she still shared with Joe. His car was there, along with another vehicle she didn't recognize. Inside, she found him in the living room with his attorney, a sharp-suited man named Derek Martinez, who specialized in aggressive divorce tactics. "Brianna," Joe said, his tone falsely pleasant, "this is Derek. We're finalizing the divorce filing. Should be submitted tomorrow." Derek stood, offered his hand. "Mrs. Scurry, I understand you're willing to cooperate with these proceedings. I am, she said. Excellent. We'll be requesting full disclosure of all business assets, property valuations, income documentation. Standard procedure. Of course. Derek pulled out a document, slid it across the coffee table. This is our preliminary filing. You'll see we're requesting the marital home, 50% of business assets related to Scurry Advanced Systems, and monthly spousal support. Mr. Perry has made significant financial and emotional investments in your business venture over the years. It's only fair he receives compensation. Brianna scanned the document. It was everything Joe had promised while drunk. Aggressive, demanding, designed to portray her as a failure he'd carried for years. I'll have my attorney review it, she said. Who's your attorney? Derek asked. She gave him the name. Derek's expression flickered. Recognition, wariness. He knew the name, knew the reputation. Good. After they left, Brianna sat alone in the living room. On the mantel were photos from their wedding. Joe young and handsome, Brianna smiling like she believed in forever. She took the photos down, put them in a box, stored the box in the garage. The house felt lighter without them. Over the next 4 months, Joe's demands escalated. His attorney was relentless, requesting documentation, scheduling depositions, treating Brianna's business like it was community property he was entitled to pillage. Amber gave birth, a boy they named Jason. She posted photos constantly. My perfect family. My amazing man. So grateful for this life. In every photo, Joe looked tired, older, but he smiled for the camera. Ruby gave an interview to a local news blogger, one of those small-time operations that covered community business stories. The headline read, "Local woman blames career-obsessed wife for son's struggles." In the article, Ruby painted a picture of Joe as a devoted husband, destroyed by Brianna's cold ambition, her refusal to prioritize family, her obsession with a business that was clearly failing. The article got shared in local business groups. Brianna's employees saw it. Some asked if she was okay. She assured them she was fine. Better than fine. Sarah found her in the office late one night, reviewing production schedules. "Boss, I'm worried about you." "Don't be." "The divorce, the media stuff, Joe's attorney demanding our financial record." "Sarah," Brianna looked up. "Do you trust me?" "Of course." "Then trust that I know exactly what I'm doing. Every demand Joe makes, every humiliation his attorney inflicts, every lie his mother tells, all of it is building towards something. And when it happens, you'll understand." 2 weeks before the court date, Brianna met with her divorce attorney for final preparations. "Their strategy is clear," her attorney said. "Portray you as a failure, Joe as the victim. Demand everything. Derek Martinez is known for this approach. He's counting on you being too intimidated to fight back." "What's our strategy?" Brianna asked. Her attorney smiled. "We show up. We let them present their case. We let Joe demand everything. And then, right when Derek thinks he's won, we introduce one piece of evidence, the Pentagon contract. Signed, sealed, public announcement ready to go. And we watch him realize he's been fighting for 50% of an empire he never knew existed." "When does the announcement go public?" "Monday morning. Your court date is Monday afternoon. The timing is perfect. By the time Joe walks into that courtroom, every news outlet in the country will know your name." Brianna closed her eyes. She'd been planning this for years, documenting every betrayal, building her company in secret, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal what she'd become while Joe drank and blamed and demanded. "I want one thing clear," she said. "I'm not doing this for revenge. No, I'm doing it for truth, for justice, for every woman who's been called cold because she chose her work, called selfish because she refused to shrink, called a failure by people who never built anything themselves. I want the truth on record. I want the world to see what I built while Joe tried to tear me down." Her attorney nodded. "Then Monday the world sees. But Brianna, are you prepared for what comes after? Because once this goes public, there's no going back. Your life changes forever." She thought about her father, about the garage where she'd learned to weld, about the birthday when Joe had brought Amber home wearing her perfume, about the hospital room where she'd held her father's hand alone because Joe couldn't be bothered to catch a flight. "I'm ready," she said. "I've been ready for 3 years." That Sunday night, Brianna couldn't sleep. Tomorrow, everything changed. Tomorrow, Joe would understand what he'd really lost, what he'd really thrown away when he chose Amber and his mother's approval over the woman who'd loved him enough to marry him. Tomorrow, the world would see Brianna Scurry not as the failed wife from Ruby's interviews, but as the defense contractor who'd beaten 12 competitors to win a contract worth nearly $1 billion. Tomorrow, truth won. But tonight, in the darkness before dawn, Brianna allowed herself to feel sad. Not for Joe, he'd made his choices, but for the girl she'd been at 25, who'd believed in love and partnership and building a life together. That girl was gone. Tomorrow would bury her forever. Chapter 7. The calm before annihilation. The Sunday before her Monday morning announcement and Monday afternoon court date stretched like a held breath. Brianna woke early in the house she would soon leave behind. Joe's car wasn't in the driveway. He'd stopped coming home most nights, staying with Amber and the baby in the condo. Brianna's divorce attorney had documented was purchased partially with marital funds Joe had withdrawn without her knowledge. She made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened her laptop. Her email was chaos. General Foster's office had sent the final press release for her approval. The Pentagon's public affairs team had coordinated with major defense publications, business journals, news outlets. The announcement would go live at 6 in the morning, timed to catch the East Coast news cycle. The headline read, "Historic Pentagon contract awarded to Scurry Advanced Systems. Black female entrepreneur wins nearly $900 million defense innovation deal." The article detailed the competitive evaluation process, the revolutionary nature of her armor system, her background as a self-taught engineer who'd built her company from a garage. It mentioned her father, his factory work, how she'd learned welding from him as a teenager. It didn't mention Joe, not once. Brianna approved the release, sent it back, closed her laptop. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Sunday morning peaceful. In a few hours, parents would be taking kids to soccer games, couples would be brunching. The world would continue its normal rhythms, while Brianna's entire existence detonated and reformed into something unrecognizable. Her phone buzzed. Sarah. "Boss, I can't sleep. Tomorrow is going to be insane. Are you ready?" Brianna typed back, "As ready as I can be. See you at the facility at 8. Another message, this one from her divorce attorney. "Remember, when you walk into that courtroom tomorrow afternoon, you walk in as one of the most successful defense contractors in the country. Hold your head high. Let Joe see what he lost." She didn't respond. Just set the phone aside and stared at her coffee. The truth was, she wasn't sure how she felt. She'd been working toward this moment for so long that now, on the edge of it, she felt strangely numb. Not triumphant, not vindicated, just tired. Around noon, her phone rang. Ruby. Brianna let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. "Brianna, it's Ruby. I know tomorrow is the court date. I just want you to know, whatever happens, I hope you can move on with your life. Joe has moved on. He's happy now, with Amber and the baby. He's building a real family. I hope you can find that kind of happiness too, though I suspect you're too cold for it. Anyway, good luck tomorrow." The message was venom wrapped in false concern, cruelty dressed as kindness. Vintage Ruby. Brianna deleted it. She spent the afternoon packing. Not everything. She'd come back for that later. Just the essentials, clothes, documents, the few personal items that mattered. She'd already arranged for a moving company to empty the house after the divorce finalized. She'd already purchased a new home, a beautiful place across town, near her facility, with a garage workshop that dwarfed the one where she'd started. That evening, she drove to the facility. The parking lot was empty. Inside, the workspace was pristine, ready for the expansion that would begin as soon as the Pentagon contract became public knowledge. She walked through the facility, trailing her hand along the equipment she'd purchased with her father's inheritance and her own determination. The welding stations, the testing chambers, the computer-controlled machinery that could produce armor plating with precision measured in microns. This was real. What she'd built was real, and tomorrow everyone would know it. She locked up, drove to a quiet diner, ate dinner alone. The waitress was friendly, chatty. "You here for the business conference at the hotel?" "Something like that," Brianna said. Back home she tried to sleep, couldn't, ended up sitting in her father's old recliner, the one piece of furniture she'd taken from his house after he died, and staring at the ceiling. She thought about Joe, about the man he'd been when they met, before the cruelty, before the betrayal. She'd loved him once, really loved him, believed they'd build a life together, support each other's dreams, be partners in every sense. When had it changed? Gradually? All at once? She couldn't pinpoint the exact moment when love had curdled into contempt, when partnership had become parasitism, when the man she'd married had become the man who stole her work and called her a failure. Maybe it didn't matter when. Maybe what mattered was that she'd survived it, built something extraordinary while he'd tried to destroy her, become powerful while he'd become pathetic. Her phone buzzed. 3 in the morning. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "Brianna, it's Derek Martinez. I'm Joe's attorney. I need to speak with you before court tomorrow. It's urgent. Please call me as soon as possible." She stared at the message. Something had changed. Something had shifted. Derek Martinez didn't send urgent middle-of-the-night texts unless he was panicking. Had he somehow found out about the Pentagon contract? Had someone leaked? Had the press release gone public early? She checked the news sites. Nothing yet. The announcement was still scheduled for 6 in the morning. She didn't respond to Derek's text, just set her phone aside and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, the truth would speak for itself. Tomorrow, Joe and his attorney and Ruby would understand what Brianna had really been doing while they'd called her a failure, a cold wife, an embarrassment. Tomorrow, the silence she'd maintained for 3 years would finally break, and the sound would be deafening. At 5:45 in the morning, Brianna woke to her alarm. She showered, dressed in the power suit she'd purchased specifically for this day, charcoal grey, perfectly tailored, expensive enough to make a statement without being ostentatious. She did her makeup carefully, chose simple jewelry, pulled her hair back in a professional style. At 5:58, she sat at her kitchen table with her phone watching the clock. At 6 o'clock exactly, the Pentagon's press release went live. Her phone started buzzing immediately. Emails, texts, calls, news alerts, social media mentions. The story was everywhere. Front page of defense industry publications, trending on business news sites, shared across LinkedIn, Twitter, everywhere. Unknown black female entrepreneur wins historic Pentagon deal. Her face was on the homepage of Defense News, Forbes, Bloomberg. The transformation from invisible to famous happened in seconds. She silenced her phone, finished her coffee, and drove to her facility. By 7, reporters were calling. By 8, there were cameras outside. By 9, her business phone had received 50 interview requests. She ignored them all. At noon, she left the facility and drove to the courthouse. The hearing was scheduled for 2. She arrived early, parked, and sat in her car, breathing slowly, centering herself. Across the lot, she saw Joe's car pull in, then Derek Martinez's BMW. She watched them get out, watched Joe's phone start ringing, watched him pull it out and stare at the screen. Watched his face change from confidence to confusion to horror. She checked her own phone one last time. 700 unread messages. She turned it off completely, got out of her car, and walked toward the courthouse entrance. Joe stood near the doors, phone pressed to his ear, face pale. He saw her. Their eyes met. She kept walking, head high, spine straight, everything her father had taught her about strength and steel and refusing to break. Behind her, she heard Ruby's voice, shrill and panicked. "Joseph, Joseph, what is happening? People are texting me about—" Brianna didn't turn around. She walked through the courthouse doors and let them close behind her, leaving Joe and his mother and the ruins of their certainty outside where they belonged. Chapter 8. The Trap Springs. The courthouse hallway smelled like floor polish and old anxiety. Brianna sat on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, her hands folded in her lap, her expression calm. Around her, the normal Monday chaos of family court. Custody disputes, restraining order hearings, divorces both amicable and vicious. Her phone, powered off in her purse, was missing the chaos exploding across every news platform, but she didn't need to see it to know. The energy in the building had changed. Court staff walked past whispering. One paralegal actually stopped to stare before her attorney yanked her away. At 1:15, Joe arrived. He wasn't alone. Derek Martinez walked beside him, looking like a man who'd just realized he'd stepped on a landmine. Ruby Perry clutched Joe's other arm, her face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. Behind them, Amber pushed a stroller, looking irritated at being dragged to court on a Monday afternoon. Joe's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Every few seconds, another call, another notification, another message. His face had gone from its usual ruddy color to an ashy gray. His hands shook. Derek saw Brianna first. He stopped walking, causing Ruby to stumble. Then he leaned close to Joe, whispering urgently. Joe's head snapped up, his eyes finding her across the hallway. She met his gaze without expression, held it until he looked away. Derek approached alone. "Ms. Scurry, I need to speak with you, now, before we go into that courtroom." "Why?" "You know why." His voice was tight, controlled. "The Pentagon announcement, 890 million. That's your company?" "Yes." "When did you sign that contract?" "Months ago." Derek's jaw clenched. "And you didn't disclose it during discovery. That's material misrepresentation, that's—" "I disclosed everything I was legally required to disclose," Brianna said calmly. "The contract was signed after your initial filing, but before final asset disclosure deadline. My attorney has all the documentation, time-stamped, witnessed, completely legal." "This is a disaster," Derek muttered. "You understand that, right? Everything we've filed, every demand we've made, it's all based on the assumption that your company was worth maybe 50,000. Maybe. Now—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "I need to withdraw our filings, request a continuance. Give us time to—" "No." Derek stared at her. "What?" "No continuance, no withdrawal. We're going in there today. Everything you filed stands. Every demand Joe made, every statement about my worthless business, every claim that he deserves compensation for supporting my failure. It all goes on record. Today." "Mrs. Scurry, I'm trying to help my client avoid complete humiliation." "Your client deserves humiliation," Brianna said, her voice still calm, but now carrying an edge that made Derek step back. "Your client stole my intellectual property, tried to present it as his own work, abandoned me while my father died, withdrew marital funds for his mistress, called my life's work worthless, embarrassing, pathetic, and now he wants to take half of what I built while he was too busy drinking and cheating to notice I was succeeding. So no, no continuance. We're doing this today." Derek opened his mouth, closed it. He looked back at Joe, who was watching from across the hallway with the expression of a man watching his life collapse in real time. "I need to consult with my client," Derek said. "You have 40 minutes, Brianna replied. She watched Derek return to Joe, watched them huddle in desperate conversation. Watched Ruby pull out her phone, scrolling frantically through what was probably her social media accounts, where her friends were definitely seeing the news, definitely connecting the dots between the failed wife she'd trash-talked in that interview and the defense contractor now on the front page of Forbes. At 1:50, Brianna's attorney arrived. Michael Chen was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for absolutely destroying opposing counsel when he had the advantage. Right now, he was smiling. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," Brianna confirmed. "I've never seen Derek Martinez look that panicked. It's beautiful." "Michael, I know, professional. But Brianna, this is the kind of case that makes careers. The story is already everywhere. By tomorrow, you'll be on morning shows. The contrast between what Joe claimed and what you actually accomplished, it's devastating for him." "Good," Brianna said simply. At 2 o'clock exactly, the bailiff opened the courtroom doors. "Perry versus Scurry. Please enter." The courtroom was small, designed for routine dissolution proceedings. Judge Mara Williams sat at the bench, reviewing files. She was a black woman in her 60s, with silver hair and a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. Brianna sat at the plaintiff's table with Michael. Joe and Derek took the defense table. Ruby sat in the gallery behind Joe, along with Amber, who was trying to soothe the baby. Judge Williams looked up. "Before we begin, I want to address something. I've seen the news this morning regarding Ms. Scurry's recent Pentagon contract. Mr. Martinez, I assume you're aware?" Derek stood. "Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to request a continuance to allow time to review." "Denied," Judge Williams said. "You've had months for discovery. This contract was disclosed in the final asset documentation your office received last week. If you failed to read the disclosure thoroughly, that's not grounds for delay. We're proceeding. Please present your case." Derek looked like he might argue, but Joe grabbed his arm, whispering urgently. Derek sat back down. "Very well," Judge Williams said. "Mr. Martinez, you filed on behalf of your client. Let's hear what Mr. Perry is requesting." Derek stood slowly. His entire demeanor had changed from the confident aggression of their earlier depositions to something that looked like a man fulfilling an obligation he desperately wanted to escape. "Your Honor, Mr. Perry is requesting the marital home, valued at approximately $400,000. He's also requesting 50% of the business assets of Scurry Advanced Systems and monthly spousal support of $4,000 for a period of—" "Stop," Judge Williams said. She was looking at her computer screen, scrolling through something. 50% of business assets. That business being Scurry Advanced Systems, which just signed an $890 million contract with the Pentagon. The courtroom went silent. "Your Honor," Derek said carefully, "at the time of filing, we were unaware of the full scope. When did you file these demands, Counselor?" 6 months ago initially, with amendments as recently as 3 weeks ago." Judge Williams looked at Derek over her reading glasses. "So 3 weeks ago you amended your filings to demand 50% of a business you called worthless in your initial documentation, the same business that was already at that time in final negotiations for a contract worth nearly $1 billion. And you want this court to grant that request?" Derek said nothing. "Ms. Scurry," Judge Williams said, "I'd like to hear from you. Did you disclose the Pentagon contract during discovery?" Brianna stood. "Yes, Your Honor. The contract was signed 4 months ago. It was included in our final asset disclosure, submitted to Mr. Martinez's office as required. The public announcement was delayed at the Pentagon's request for security reasons, but the contract itself was never hidden from legal proceedings." "And Mr. Perry's involvement in your company?" "Zero involvement, Your Honor. He has no technical expertise, no ownership stake, no role in operations. Scurry Advanced Systems was built entirely with my own capital, my own expertise, and funding from contracts I secured independently." Judge Williams turned back to Joe. "Mr. Perry, stand please." Joe stood, unsteady. He looked smaller than Brianna remembered, diminished. "Mr. Perry, help me understand something. You're requesting 50% of a company you claim to have supported during your marriage, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you're also requesting spousal support because you claim you sacrificed your own career prospects to support your wife's business ventures?" "That's correct." Judge Williams pulled out a document. "Then explain this. This is your attorney's initial filing from 6 months ago. I'm reading directly. The defendant's business venture, Scurry Advanced Systems, has failed to generate meaningful revenue and represents a financial drain on the marital estate. The plaintiff requests the court consider this failure when determining asset division. Does that sound like a business you supported, a business you believed in, a business you now claim partial ownership of? Joe's mouth opened, closed. No words came. Your Honor, Derek interjected, my client's understanding of the business evolved. Your client's understanding evolved in the 48 hours between the Pentagon announcement and this hearing, Judge Williams said sharply. That's not evolution, Counselor. That's opportunism, and this court doesn't reward opportunism. She pulled out more documents. I also have evidence submitted by Ms. Scurry's attorney, showing that Mr. Perry attempted to present his wife's intellectual property as his own work to investors, that he withdrew $67,000 from joint accounts without Ms. Scurry's knowledge or consent, that he was absent during her father's final illness and death, and that he maintained a long-term affair, financed partially with marital funds, while publicly denigrating his wife's work. Ruby made a sound in the gallery, something between a gasp and a sob. Judge Williams looked at her. Ma'am, you'll need to remain silent or leave the courtroom. Ruby covered her mouth with her handkerchief. Mr. Martinez, Judge Williams continued, does your client wish to proceed with his demands? 50% of an $890 million Pentagon contract, 4,000 monthly in spousal support from a woman he called a failure, the marital home he claims he alone paid for, despite evidence showing Miss Scurry contributed equally? Derek looked at Joe. Joe looked at the floor. No, Your Honor, Derek said quietly. We'd like to withdraw those specific requests and negotiate a more reasonable— Too late, Judge Williams said. You made your demands. You publicly, through legal filings, characterized Ms. Scurry as a failed entrepreneur. You attempted to claim credit and compensation for her work. You tried to take assets from a woman you systematically undermined and betrayed. So now, we're going to address those demands. All of them. She pulled off her reading glasses, looked directly at Joe, and Brianna saw in the judge's eyes something she recognized. Another woman who'd been underestimated, another woman who'd watched men take credit for work they didn't do, another woman who was done with it. Chapter 9. The Courtroom Execution. Judge Mara Williams wasn't finished. Here's how this is going to work, she said, her voice carrying the weight of 30 years on the bench and zero tolerance for the spectacle unfolding before her. Mr. Martinez, you filed aggressive demands on behalf of your client. You characterized Mrs. Scurry's business as worthless, her career as a failure, her contributions to the marriage as inadequate. You demanded assets, support, and compensation based on those characterizations. We're going to examine every single one of those claims. Mr. Chen, please present your response. Michael Chen stood, opening a folder thick with documentation. Your Honor, we'd like to submit into evidence the following items. First, provisional patent filings from Ms. Scurry dating back 7 years, long before her marriage, showing her original development of the armor systems now contracted by the Pentagon. Second, email correspondence between Mr. Perry and potential investors where he presented Ms. Scurry's work as his own. Third, bank records showing Mr. Perry's unauthorized withdrawal of $67,000 from joint accounts over an 18-month period. Fourth, hotel and restaurant receipts from that same period, corresponding with his affair with Ms. Amber Chen. And fifth, phone records showing Mr. Perry ignored multiple calls from Ms. Scurry while her father was dying in the hospital. He laid each document set on the defense table as he spoke. Derek Martinez didn't reach for them. He already knew what they contained. Additionally, Michael continued, we have testimony from Ms. Scurry's employees documenting Mr. Perry's visit to her workshop where he served divorce papers in front of her staff, publicly humiliating her and calling her business worthless trash. We have interview transcripts where Mr. Perry's mother called Ms. Scurry's career an embarrassment and claimed her son wasted his potential supporting it. And we have Mr. Perry's own text messages to his girlfriend sent 2 weeks before filing for divorce, where he wrote, And I quote, "Once I figure out if her company is worth stealing, I'm gone." The last document hit the table with a slap that echoed in the silent courtroom. Ruby made another sound. Amber had gone very still, her hand frozen on the stroller handle. Judge Williams motioned Michael to continue. "Your Honor, Mr. Perry didn't support his wife's career. He actively tried to sabotage it. He stole her intellectual property and attempted to present it as his own work to investors. When that failed and he was caught, he blamed her for his humiliation. He withdrew marital funds to support an affair while his wife worked 80-hour weeks building a company he publicly mocked. He abandoned her during the worst moment of her life, her father's death, to stay in Miami with his girlfriend. And now, upon learning that the business he called worthless is actually worth hundreds of millions of dollars, he wants 50% and monthly support. It's not just unreasonable, Your Honor, it's obscene." Michael sat down. The courtroom remained silent. Judge Williams looked at the documents spread across the defense table. "Mr. Martinez, would you like to respond to any of these allegations?" Derek stood slowly. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges that the marriage broke down. He acknowledges he made mistakes, but the business, he genuinely believed it was failing. The separation of finances, the outside relationship, these are symptoms of a marriage that was already over. He's not trying to steal from Ms. Scurry. He's trying to secure his own future after years of—" "Stop," Judge Williams said. "Just stop. I've been doing this job for 30 years. I've seen every variation of this pattern. Successful woman, insecure husband, systematic undermining disguised as concern or support. Mr. Perry didn't believe his wife's business was failing. He wanted it to fail. He needed it to fail so he could maintain his narrative that she was the problem, that her ambitions were the obstacle to his happiness. When it didn't fail, when it succeeded beyond anything he could imagine, he tried to steal it. And when that didn't work, he tried to destroy it through litigation. Well, Counselor, that strategy has failed spectacularly." She turned to Joe, who hadn't looked up from the floor since Michael's presentation. "Mr. Perry, look at me." He raised his head slowly. His eyes were red. Whether from emotion or hangover, Brianna couldn't tell. "You had a wife who was brilliant," Judge Williams said, "who worked harder than you'll probably ever understand to build something extraordinary. Who could have been your partner, your equal, someone to celebrate and support? Instead, you chose to diminish her, steal from her, abandon her when she needed you most. And now you want to be rewarded for that behavior by taking half of what she built without you, despite you, in spite of you. Is that accurate?" Joe's voice cracked. I didn't know it would be worth—" "That's the problem," Judge Williams interrupted. "You didn't value her work because you didn't know it would make money. Her worth to you was financial. Her validity as a person depended on commercial success you could measure and claim. That's not a marriage, Mr. Perry. That's not even a partnership. That's exploitation." Ruby stood in the gallery. "Your Honor, if I may—" "Sit down, ma'am. You've done enough damage with your interviews and your public statements calling your daughter-in-law an embarrassment. You raised a son who thinks women exist to serve his ego, and now you're watching the consequences of that parenting. Sit down." Ruby sat, her face mottled red and white. Judge Williams returned to her documents. "Here's my ruling. Ms. Scurry retains full ownership of Scurry Advanced Systems. 0% to Mr. Perry. The business was built with her expertise, her capital from her father's inheritance, and her relentless work ethic. Mr. Perry contributed nothing except obstacles." Derek started to speak. Judge Williams raised one hand, silencing him. "The marital home goes to Ms. Scurry. Yes, Mr. Perry contributed to mortgage payments. So did Ms. Scurry, in addition to building a company worth hundreds of millions. His contributions do not outweigh hers. He can collect his personal belongings within 30 days. Regarding the $67,000 withdrawn without Ms. Scurry's knowledge or consent, Mr. Perry, you will repay that amount in full, plus another $60,000 in compensation for emotional distress, calculated at $1,000 for each day Ms. Scurry sat alone in that hospital while her father died and you stayed in Miami with your girlfriend." Amber gasped. Someone in the gallery whispered, Judge Williams ignored them. Total payment to Ms. Scurry, $127,000. You have 6 months to pay. If you default, we'll garnish your wages, though I suspect finding employment after this hearing becomes public record will be challenging. As for spousal support, Mr. Perry is requesting $4,000 monthly. I'm denying that request and reversing it. Miss Scurry, do you want spousal support from Mr. Perry? Brianna stood. No, Your Honor. I want nothing from him. Not his money, not his name, not his presence in my life. I just want this marriage ended so I can move forward. Judge Williams nodded. Marriage dissolved, effective immediately. Both parties revert to their premarital names if desired. All joint accounts closed and divided according to contribution records. All joint credit cards cancelled. Mr. Perry, you are prohibited from contacting Ms. Scurry directly for any reason. All communication goes through attorneys. She signed several documents with quick, efficient movements. This hearing is concluded. Ms. Scurry, congratulations on your Pentagon contract and on your freedom from a marriage that never valued what you brought to it. Mr. Perry, I hope you use this experience to examine how you treat women, and particularly how you treat women who have the audacity to be more successful than you are. Dismissed. The gavel came down. For a moment nobody moved. Then Ruby burst into tears, loud, dramatic sobs that echoed in the small courtroom. Amber grabbed her purse and the stroller, heading for the exit without looking at Joe. Other people in the gallery began standing, whispering, pulling out phones. Joe sat motionless at the defense table, staring at nothing. Derek Martinez gathered his papers quickly, efficiently, like a man escaping a disaster. I'll be in touch about the financial arrangements, he muttered to Michael Chen, then practically ran from the courtroom. Brianna remained seated. Michael touched her shoulder. You okay? Yes, she said. I'm okay. The media is going to swarm this. The story was already big. Pentagon contract, black woman entrepreneur, major success. Now with the divorce details, the attempted theft, the drama. Brianna, you're about to become very famous. I know. You sure you're ready for that? She thought about the garage where she'd started, about her father teaching her to weld, to trust her own hands, to believe she could build anything, about the nights working until exhaustion, about the betrayals and abandonments and cruelties she'd survived. I'm ready, she said. She stood, collected her purse, walked toward the courtroom exit. As she passed Joe's table, he looked up. Their eyes met. Brianna, he said, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't understand what... You're right, she said quietly. You didn't understand. You never tried to understand. And now you never will. She walked out of the courtroom, through the courthouse doors, into the bright afternoon sun where reporters were already gathering, cameras ready, questions prepared. Michael Chen appeared beside her. Ready for your first press conference? No, Brianna admitted, but let's do it anyway. She stepped up to the microphone someone had set up on the courthouse steps, looked at the sea of cameras and curious faces, and began to speak. Not about Joe, not about the divorce, not about revenge or vindication or any of the personal drama that had led to this moment. She spoke about her company, about the technology that would protect soldiers, about the importance of supporting women in STEM fields, about her father who'd believed in her when nobody else did. She spoke for 15 minutes, answered questions with grace and intelligence, and when it was done, she walked to her car alone. As she drove back to her facility, past the reporters still gathered at the courthouse, past the life she was leaving behind forever, Brianna Scurry allowed herself one moment of triumph, not because she'd won, but because she'd survived. And survival, she was learning, was its own kind of victory. Chapter 10. The Long Road to Earned Forgiveness. 9 months after the divorce, Brianna Scurry stood in her new home, looking out over a city that had learned her name, for reasons that had nothing to do with Joe Perry. The house was beautiful. Modern, spacious, with a garage workshop that made her original setup look like a hobbyist's corner. She'd furnished it slowly, carefully, choosing pieces that felt like her rather than filling space quickly. It was the first home she'd lived in, that was entirely her own. Scurry Advanced Systems now employed over 200 people across 2 facilities. The Pentagon contract was proceeding flawlessly. She'd been featured in Forbes, Fortune, interviewed on morning shows, invited to speak at engineering conferences and women's leadership summits. Her calendar stayed perpetually booked with obligations she'd never imagined having. She'd cut her hair short, started working out, learned to delegate responsibilities instead of trying to do everything herself. The woman in the mirror looked different now, stronger, healthier, finally rested after years of running on determination and spite. Joe's life had taken a different trajectory. She heard things through the inevitable connections that existed in any mid-sized city. Amber had left him when the money she'd expected didn't materialize, took their son Jason and filed for maximum child support. Ruby had suffered a stroke during the media aftermath of the divorce, the stress and public humiliation apparently triggering a health crisis that left her partially paralyzed. She was in a nursing facility now, abandoned by the country club friends who'd listened to her trash-talk Brianna and now wanted nothing to do with the woman whose interview had aged so spectacularly badly. Joe had lost his real estate license. The patent fraud lawsuit and the courtroom revelations had made him unemployable in professional circles. He worked retail now, something at a sporting goods store, lived in a studio apartment, drove a 15-year-old car. Brianna didn't follow his life deliberately, didn't seek information. But in a city their size, information found you anyway. What surprised her was that the updates that did reach her suggested something she hadn't expected, genuine change. Her assistant mentioned seeing Joe at a men's therapy group. One of her engineers, who coached youth basketball, reported that Joe had started volunteering with the program, showing up consistently, working with kids, apparently taking it seriously rather than just fulfilling court-ordered community service. The letters started arriving 3 months after the divorce. Joe's handwriting, her company address, always marked personal. She threw the first 5 away unopened. The 6th one, she opened. She wasn't sure why. Curiosity, maybe, or just a desire to know if he was still blaming her, still making excuses, still fundamentally the same person who'd tried to steal her work and call it his own. The letter wasn't what she expected. Brianna, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect anything from you. I'm writing because my therapist says I need to take accountability without demanding forgiveness, and this is part of that process. So here's what I need to say. I was wrong, not just about some things, about everything. I abused you emotionally. I stole from you. I abandoned you. I tried to destroy something beautiful because I couldn't stand watching you succeed where I was failing. I taught myself to see your strength as coldness, your dedication as selfishness, your success as my humiliation. And none of that was true. You were remarkable, and I was too insecure and too cruel to celebrate that. You don't owe me forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did to you. And I'm sorry. Joe. She read it twice, then filed it away. More letters came, monthly, never demanding a response, never asking for contact, just documenting his therapy work, his volunteering, his slow rebuild of a life that would never touch the heights he'd once taken for granted. She didn't respond, didn't acknowledge them. Just filed them away and continued building her empire. Nearly 1 year after the divorce, Brianna received a call from Valley Memorial Senior Care. Ms. Scurry, this is regarding Ruby Perry. She's listed you as emergency contact. I know that's probably outdated, but... What's wrong? Brianna asked. She's dying. Days, maybe hours. She's been asking for you. Specifically asking. Says she needs to apologize before she goes. Brianna sat at her desk, phone pressed to her ear, trying to process the request. Ruby, who'd called her cold, who'd trashed her in interviews, who'd raised Joe to believe women existed to serve his needs, Ruby wanted to apologize. I'll come, Brianna said. She wasn't sure why. Maybe closure. Maybe curiosity. Maybe just because her father had taught her that holding on to rage was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Ruby's room at the facility was small, institutional, decorated with photos nobody visited anymore. The woman in the bed looked shrunken, diminished, nothing like the imposing figure who'd once judged every aspect of Brianna's life and found it wanting. "Brianna," Ruby's voice was weak, slurred from the stroke. "You came. You asked for me. I don't deserve your time. But I needed to say—" She struggled for breath. "I failed my son. I taught him to be cruel. Taught him that women should be small, supportive, never more successful than their husbands. Taught him your value came from serving his needs. And when you refused to be small, when you built something extraordinary, I called you embarrassing, called you cold, blamed you for his failures that were really my failures because I raised him wrong." Tears leaked from her eyes. "You were remarkable. You are remarkable. And I spent years trying to crush that because it threatened everything I'd been taught about how women should be. I'm sorry, Brianna. I'm so sorry. I hope one day you'll be able to forgive me, though I know I don't deserve it." Brianna sat in the chair beside the bed. "Ruby, I don't know if I forgive you. I honestly don't know. You hurt me, for years. You made me doubt myself, made me feel like my dreams were selfish, like my success was something to be ashamed of. That damage doesn't disappear because you apologize at the end." "I know," Ruby whispered, "but I hear you. I hear that you understand what you did. And that matters. It doesn't erase the past, but it matters." Ruby died 2 days later. The funeral was tiny. Joe, a few distant relatives, Brianna in the back row. Afterward, Joe approached her carefully, like someone approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "Thank you for coming," he said, "for visiting her before. Thank you. She asked for me. I came, that's all. Can I buy you coffee, just to talk? I don't want anything, I'd like to talk to you, as humans, not as ex-spouses, just talk." She looked at him, really looked. He'd lost weight, looked healthier than during those final years of their marriage. His eyes were clearer. He held himself differently, less arrogant, more humble, carrying his failures like lessons rather than grievances. "One coffee," she said. "That's all." They met at a neutral cafe the following week. He arrived early, ordered nothing, just sat waiting. She arrived exactly on time, ordered a latte, sat across from him in the booth. "I've been in therapy," Joe said without preamble. 18 months now. Group therapy for men who've been emotionally abusive. Individual sessions twice a week. I've been working through everything. Every way I hurt you. Every lie I told myself to justify it. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know I'm not the same person. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. I'm not asking to be friends. I know that's impossible. I just want you to know that what you went through, what I put you through, it wasn't your fault. It was never your fault. You were perfect. I was broken, and I tried to break you too, and I'm grateful every day that you were too strong to break." Brianna sipped her coffee. "You stole from me, Joe. You tried to erase me from my own work. You abandoned me when my father died. Those aren't small things. Those aren't mistakes. Those are fundamental betrayals that changed who I am." "I know," he said. "I know, and I can't undo them. I can't make them right. All I can do is acknowledge them, own them completely, and try to be someone different going forward. Not for you, for me, because I don't want to be that person anymore." He pulled out his phone, showed her photos. Kids in basketball uniforms, all different ages, smiling at the camera. "I coach now. Volunteer program for underprivileged kids. Started after the divorce as community service. Kept doing it because these kids need someone who shows up, consistently. Someone who doesn't disappear when things get hard. I'm trying to be that person." "That's good," Brianna said. "Genuinely. I'm glad you're doing that work. I saw you on the news last month, the new facility opening, the expansion into international contracts. Brianna, what you've built is incredible. I mean that, and I'm sorry I never said it when we were married. I'm sorry I was too insecure and too cruel to celebrate you." They sat in silence for a moment. "I don't forgive you," Brianna said finally. I don't know if I ever will. The hurt you caused, it changed me. Made me harder, more guarded, less trusting. I had to rebuild myself from pieces you helped break, and that's not something I can just forgive because you're in therapy now. I understand. But I don't hate you either. Not anymore. I'm neutral. You're someone I used to know who hurt me badly and is apparently trying to be better, that's all. Joe nodded slowly. That's more than I deserve. Thank you for the coffee. Thank you for listening. He stood to leave, paused. One more thing. The kids I coach, some of them have parents who are engineers, business owners, really successful people. And sometimes the kids talk about feeling like they're not good enough, like they can't measure up. I tell them about you, not by name, I tell them about someone I knew who built something extraordinary from nothing, who faced people trying to tear her down and just kept building, who showed me that real strength isn't about being the loudest or the most aggressive. It's about being so committed to your vision that nothing can shake you. The kids respond to that story. I hope that's okay. Brianna felt something shift in her chest, not forgiveness. She'd been honest about that. But maybe the first crack in the ice she'd built around the parts of herself that had once loved this man. That's okay, she said. You can tell them that story. Several more months passed. Brianna's life continued its upward trajectory. More contracts, more recognition, more opportunities. She started dating again, carefully, slowly, learning to trust that not everyone would try to take pieces of what she'd built. On what would have been their 10th anniversary, Joe sent one last letter. She opened it in her home office late at night after a long day. Brianna, 10 years ago, I married you. I promised to love you, support you, be your partner through everything. I broke every one of those promises. I spent years trying to make myself feel bigger by making you feel smaller, and all I accomplished was losing the most remarkable person I'll ever know. I don't write this expecting anything. I write it because today, on our anniversary, I wanted you to know, I see it now. I see what you were trying to build with me, what we could have been if I'd had the courage and maturity to be your equal instead of your critic. I see the life we could have had if I'd celebrated your strength instead of fearing it. I'm not asking for another chance. I know I destroyed that possibility permanently. I'm just saying I finally understand what I lost, and I hope, I really hope, that whoever you choose to share your life with, if anyone, has the wisdom to see what I was too broken to recognize. You deserved better than me. You deserve everything. Joe. She read it twice, then filed it with the others. The following day, she surprised herself by calling him. Joe, it's Brianna. Silence on the other end, then, Hi, is everything okay? I got your letter, the anniversary one. I'm sorry if it was inappropriate. Stop, just listen. I've been thinking about something. I don't forgive you for what you did. I might never forgive you, but I also don't want to carry this anger forever. It's exhausting. So I want to try something. Coffee again, once a month, not as exes, not as friends. Just as two people who share a complicated history and are trying to figure out how to exist in the same city without destroying each other. Can you do that? Show up. Be honest. Don't expect anything beyond civil conversation. Yes, he said immediately. Yes, I can do that. They met the following week, and the week after that, and slowly, over months of careful, boundaried conversations, Brianna began to see someone she hadn't known existed underneath the man she'd divorced. Joe talked about his therapy with genuine insight, discussed his coaching with real passion, acknowledged his failures without making excuses. He didn't flirt, didn't hint at reconciliation, didn't treat their meetings as anything other than what she'd defined them to be. He showed her, through consistent action over time, that he'd actually changed. 18 months after their divorce was finalized, Brianna made a decision. They were having coffee, their regular monthly meeting, when she said, I have a question. Hypothetically, if someone had hurt you the way you hurt me, and they'd spent years doing the work to change, actually change, not just perform change, would you ever consider giving them a second chance? Joe went very still. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I don't know what I'm asking. I'm thinking out loud. Then here's my answer. I would consider it if their actions matched their words consistently over a long period, not months, years, and if they never pushed, never demanded, never treated forgiveness as something they were owed rather than something they had to earn every single day. And even then, I'd be scared. Because once someone shows you they're capable of that level of cruelty, part of you never fully trusts them again. Brianna nodded slowly. That's fair. But Brianna, if you're asking about us... I'm not asking anything, she interrupted. I'm just acknowledging that you've changed, that the person you are now is someone I don't hate, someone I might even respect in specific, limited ways. That's all. I don't know what that means for the future. I don't know if it means anything. That's more than I ever hoped for, Joe said quietly. Whatever happens from here, whether we stay exactly like this, whether we drift apart, whether something shifts over time, I want you to know I'm grateful. You didn't owe me these conversations. You didn't owe me the chance to apologize, to explain, to show you I've changed, but you gave me that anyway, and it's meant everything. She looked at him across the cafe table, saw the grey in his hair that hadn't been there during their marriage, saw the lines around his eyes from actual genuine laughter rather than the bitter smirks she remembered, saw a man who'd fallen hard and maybe, possibly, was climbing back up to something resembling decent. Joe, I don't know what our future holds. I don't know if I'll ever trust you fully again. But for the first time since you served me those divorce papers in front of my employees, I don't feel rage when I look at you. And that's something. It's everything, he said. They finished their coffee, made plans for the following month. Nothing more, nothing less. As Brianna drove home that evening, past the facility where 200 people worked on contracts she'd secured, past the courthouse where a judge had validated her truth, past the house where she and Joe had failed each other in so many ways, she felt something she hadn't expected. Peace. Not closure. That was too simple, too neat for the complexity of what they'd been through. Not forgiveness. That was still far beyond reach, might always be beyond reach. Just peace. The exhaustion of anger finally fading. The possibility of coexistence without destruction. The small, tentative, heavily guarded opening of a door that had been welded shut for years. She didn't know what would come through that door. Maybe nothing. Maybe Joe would prove consistent for another year, another 5 years, and still she'd never feel safe enough to risk more than monthly coffee. Or maybe, impossibly, overtime measured in years rather than months, with consistent action rather than grand gestures, with humility earned through genuine transformation rather than performed for her approval. Maybe something could grow in the ruins. Not what they'd had. That was dead, buried, cremated, scattered, gone forever. But possibly something new, built on truth instead of illusion, on equality instead of domination, on mutual respect earned through fire rather than promised in vows neither had understood. She didn't owe him that possibility, didn't owe him anything, but she owed herself the choice to decide in her own time, on her own terms, what she wanted her future to hold. And for the first time since that terrible birthday when Joe brought Amber home wearing her perfume, Brianna Scurry felt like the future was entirely, completely, powerfully her own to build. The end.